In the 1988 Japanese animated cyberpunk film Akira, there's a scene where a group of characters ride this large and very distinct freight elevator down to the lower levels of a military research base. For the past few years now, I have been low-key obsessed with this elevator. Also, yes, I'm pronouncing it Akira and not Akira, because that's how Chester Bennington pronounced it. Y'all can deal with it. Anyway, several years back, I learned a bit of trivia about how this elevator in Half-Life is a nearly one-to-one recreation of what we see in Akira, specifically the version depicted in the manga. After that, I started noticing a lot of similar elevators making appearances in other games. The weird thing, though, is that no one else at the time seemed to have noticed this trend. When I looked into it, I couldn't find hardly anything online. No TV Tropes article, no compilation videos on YouTube, no Reddit posts, no clickbait listicles, nothing identifying this diagonal elevator design as a recurring trope in games. The internet's list of Akira-like elevators basically begins and ends with the one in Half-Life. At least that was the case a few years ago. Since then, Rock Paper Shotgun has published an article that goes in-depth on this topic and provides some good examples. But that's more about big elevators in general, and even 2 years later, it's the only real literature on this topic. Now, I didn't find this article until I started writing the script for this video, and in the meantime, I've been taking note of every Akira elevator I see in a game, be it when I'm playing, or have just seen online in screenshots or YouTube videos. After doing this for a couple years, I've compiled enough examples to make this video, and I'm going to be ranking all of these elevators in a tier list, because otherwise I'd just be reading them off one by one, which is kinda boring. Before we get to that, though, we first need to figure out what even qualifies as an Akira elevator. The first and most obvious criteria is that, unlike regular elevators, these lifts travel at an angle, moving their passengers both vertically and laterally at the same time. Now, there's actually a lot of different things designed to achieve this type of motion, both in games and in real life, so we're going to need to be more specific. For the purposes of this video, an Akira elevator is any diagonally moving platform that meets the following four conditions. 1. The platform must run along a solid rail or track. This eliminates things like cable cars and zip lines, as well as platforms that are suspended in midair via rockets, magnets, or other video game magic. 2. The platform must travel along a singular straight line. It shouldn't curve or deviate from its path in any way. The platform you ride into the fire pit in Portal would count as an Akira elevator if not for this restriction. 3. The platform must remain level with the ground at all times. This eliminates things like trains, trolleys, or mine carts that change to match the angle of the track. 4. The angle between the elevator platform and the guide rail must always be greater than 90 degrees. In other words, it should not be possible to draw a straight line from the top of the platform to the underside of the track or guide rail. This means things like ski lifts and hanging platforms are disqualified, as well as platforms like these ones in Mario that fully intersect their guide rails. Now, I did hit one pretty major snag when trying to define what makes an Akira elevator, and that's the existence of real-world diagonal elevators. These are formally referred to as Inclinators, and you may notice that they look quite a bit different from what we see depicted in Akira. The most striking difference is that most of these systems are fitted with a full upright elevator cab, whereas the Akira elevator is a massive industrial freight lift with an unenclosed platform. According to my research, the Akira style of Inclinator does not exist in real life, which begs the question, do real-world Inclinators qualify as Akira elevators? This is a trickier question to answer than you might think. There are some examples like this one that pretty clearly meet all the requirements I just laid out, just with an upright cab sitting atop the platform. However, a lot of Inclinators, maybe even the majority of them, are used in large outdoor installations. These often have tracks that don't maintain a fixed angle, and cabs that look more like they belong on some sort of people mover or roller coaster than an elevator. While I could assess each of these installations on a case-by-case basis to see if they meet the criteria for an Akira elevator, you also have to consider that unlike in a video game, these are real products made by real companies that have real names and model numbers. So the question I keep coming back to is this. If a particular model of Inclinator meets the criteria for an Akira elevator in one installation, but not in another, does that disqualify all instances of that model from being considered Akira elevators? I don't know how to answer that question, and honestly, it doesn't have any impact on the examples we're going to be looking at today. I've just put way too much thought into this over the years, and the fact that I can't clearly define whether or not Inclinators count as Akira elevators bothers me. Now for the actual ranking, and just to be clear, this is a ranking of the elevators themselves, not the games they appear in. The game could totally suck, but if there's a sequence where a massive Akira elevator whirs and hisses and grinds its way down into the depths of some facility, it's probably getting pretty high up on this list. Starting off, we of course have the elevator from Half-Life. This one is an easy A tier. It's a near-perfect replica of the elevator shown in the Akira manga, or at least as perfect as could reasonably be achieved with 3D graphics in the 90s. The only real changes from the source material are the removal of the control panel on the platform, and the addition of a toxic waste pit at the bottom of the shaft, which I assume was added to prevent players from jumping down and trivializing this section. This lift also plays host to a set piece, where you have to fend off head crabs that come careening down towards you from the top of the shaft. Overall, a great, authentic-feeling Akira elevator that integrates well into the game world and makes for a very memorable set piece. The only thing that keeps this one from being S tier is a lack of visual fidelity compared to some of the other entries. While this is the most iconic Akira elevator in Half-Life, it's not the only one. There's a second elevator towards the end of the game when you descend down into the Lambda core. This one is smaller and doesn't have any sort of set piece tied to it, though it does have a truck parked on it, which is a bit unique. This one is just used to build tension at the start of the level. I do prefer the design of the elevator platform to the first one, and the darker lighting in this area feels more appropriate, but overall, it's not a super interesting or memorable Akira elevator. It is well designed though, so I'm gonna give it a B tier. Of course, we now need to take a look at these same two elevators in Black Mesa. The first elevator sequence has been overhauled for the better. Everything that was good about this elevator in Half-Life is still here, but now with greatly improved graphics. The elevator platform and surrounding area have all been made larger and fleshed out with extra detail. The sound effects are better, the lighting is far moodier, and the controls are now actually on the elevator platform. The elevator in the original Half-Life felt like a video game representation of what we see in Akira, whereas this one feels more like a full-on recreation. This gets an S tier. The Lambda Core elevator has also been improved in the remake. The platform moves slower now than it did in the original. Combine that with improved lighting and sound effects, and this descent feels distinctly tense and claustrophobic in a way the original just can't match. It's still not the most memorable sequence, but the execution here is top-notch. A tier. Now, we aren't done with Half-Life quite yet, because the expansions, Opposing Force and Blue Shift, each feature their own Akira elevators that are very similar to each other. These both reuse assets from the Lambda Core elevator in Half-Life. In both games, you wait on the lower level, and the elevator brings down a couple of Vortigaunts to fight off. Both of these are basically just glorified monster closets. Opposing Force at least tries to spring this on you as a sort of trap, and it arguably is kind of neat as a set piece, but in Blue Shift, you have to push a button in this control room to lower the elevator yourself, and you don't get any closer to it afterwards. You can barely see the elevator from this angle, and the Vortigaunts don't pose much of a threat from this distance. This sucks. The elevator in Opposing Force gets a C tier, and the one in Blue Shift gets a D. Now we're finally done with Half-Life. Next on my list is Devil May Cry 2, where an Akira elevator takes you down to the lower section of the lab area. Graphically, this game isn't much more advanced than Half-Life, but I think this elevator looks a lot better due to the baked-in lighting on the textures and the static camera framing that helps hide some of the rougher edges. I particularly like the spinning caution lights they added, which is a common trope with these elevators. There's a bunch of little flying enemies you have to fight off during the descent, and the elevator delivers you directly into a fight with a group of larger enemies. This makes the elevator ride a lot less tense, but this fight is cool in its own right, and I wouldn't expect anything else from a Devil May Cry game. Where this one really falls short is in the sound design. There's a generic industrial freight lift sound when the elevator starts moving, and another one when it hits the bottom. That's it though. The elevator makes zero noise for most of its descent, or if it does, it's drowned out by the sound of gunshots and rock music. This one also moves a bit too smoothly for my liking. Nothing here really sells the size or weight of this platform. Overall, a good one, but could be improved a bit. B tier. Next up is the most recently released game on this list, Biomorph. After a major boss fight that I won't show because spoilers, you take an Akira elevator down to the bottom floor of this factory to collect the obligatory Metroidvania power-up. The sprite work on this elevator is fantastic. I don't think they could have done a much better job with this art style. I particularly like the addition of the wheel that spins as it moves along the track. I wish more of these things would depict the cogs and wheels that must be churning away under their massive platforms. Unfortunately, everything else about this one is a bit lacking. Like the one in DMC2, the animation here feels too smooth, and the descent is a bit too fast for my liking. Just adding some particle effects to simulate dust or sparks would have done a lot to make this lift feel more imposing. The sound design is also nothing to write home about, though it is perfectly adequate. I'm going to give this one a high C tier. Also, consider this a recommendation for Biomorph. This game came out last year, and I don't think I've seen a single YouTube video or online discussion about it in that time. This game is like a slightly simplified, easier version of Hollow Knight if it was designed by that one person in your middle school class who wore eyeshadow and an Invader Zim hoodie and was probably secretly a furry. Seriously, go play Biomorph. It's not the most original game, but it is really good. Now it's time to go from a game I played recently to one I physically can't play at all, because it's a VR title, and any movement in VR makes me want to vomit instantly. I'm talking about Bonelab. I don't really know much about this game, but I do know that this Akira elevator is in one of its levels. This is one of the best looking Akira elevators I've seen yet. The detail they put into this one is fantastic. I love the steam jets that shoot out when it starts up, and you can even climb down below the platform to see how it connects to the track. The sound design is also really good. Unfortunately, this shaft is much shorter than most of the other examples on this list, and the elevator moves fairly quickly, so there's not much of an opportunity to really appreciate the otherwise excellent design. I almost wonder if this is a VR thing, like if limiting how far off the ground the camera can get helps reduce motion sickness or something. Regardless, this elevator would be an A tier in my book if you got to spend more time writing it, but as is, I'm putting it at the top of B tier. The next example I have is from Doom 3, and this one is phenomenal. Towards the end of the campaign, you're exploring an abandoned mining facility under the Martian surface, and you walk into this room that has a massive hole in the floor and a diagonal shaft that looks like it goes down forever. You call the lift and have to fight off some demons that spawn while you wait for it to arrive. Eventually, this massive platform rattles its way up to the top of the shaft. You get on, hit the button, and descend down into the unknown. It gets darker and darker as you travel down the shaft until you can barely see anything in your immediate surroundings. Then the room at the end of the tunnel becomes visible and gradually comes into focus as you approach. There's a maniacal laugh as you reach the bottom of the shaft and the room fully comes into view, followed by a showcase of the physics engine via some falling rocks and a demon ambush just as the platform reaches the bottom. Now this is how you do an Akira elevator. This whole sequence feels like a descent into hell, which is a bit ironic considering that by this point in the game, you've already taken a literal trip to hell and made it back alive. Regardless, this elevator sequence has by far the thickest, most foreboding atmosphere of anything on this list, thanks to Doom 3's dynamic lighting and incredible sound design. I don't know how this descent could be improved. This is an S-tier Akira elevator, no question. Switching gears a little, the next Akira elevator is from Sin and Punishment on the Nintendo 64, and it's a pretty unique one. This game is a rail shooter, so instead of using the elevator as a transition between gameplay sections, it's an entire level that takes place on the elevator. Enemies come down from above as you ride up, and occasionally it'll stop on different floors, where a group of enemies will try to swarm onto the platform. This is the first Akira elevator we've seen that can stop on multiple floors, and I never even considered how that would be achieved until I saw this sequence. There are also these enemies that descend towards you on smaller elevator platforms, not quite sure how that's supposed to work. Towards the end of the level, the platform speeds up considerably as you approach the boss encounter, also making this the first elevator we've seen to move at multiple speeds. I had a hard time ranking this one because it's good for completely different reasons than anything else on this list. Perhaps the most unique thing about this one is that the platform you ride on is actually the top of an elevator cab that has your companion characters inside. The elevator itself is kind of lacking in both visual and sound design, but at the same time, I don't really know how you could do much better within the confines of a Nintendo 64 game. I think the creativity on display here more than makes up for that, so I'm gonna put it in A tier. Now we're gonna go from N64 to PlayStation with Metal Gear Solid. I think this Akira elevator has the largest platform we've seen yet. This is another one where you have to wait for the platform to come to you before going down, which I do like. The visuals are clearly held back by the limitations of the PS1, but the designers did a good job using textures and lighting to imply more detail than they can show. The real star of the show with this one is the 3 enemies you have to fight off during the descent. It may be the more grounded setting or the clunky controls, but this fight feels distinctly more intense than the previous elevator fights we've seen. There's another identical elevator that you ride immediately after this one, with the only real difference being a less intense fight on the way down, so I'm going to group these two together. My biggest gripe with these ones is that they have fade-out transitions at the beginning and end of their descents. I'm sure this is a technical limitation of the PlayStation, but these types of elevators are typically used to create a smooth transition between two areas, so this is especially jarring. These elevators would be an easy A tier, but unfortunately they lose a point for those transitions, so they gotta go in B tier. Next is another PlayStation title, Final Fantasy VII. The Akira elevator in this game is by far the best looking we've seen from this era, but that's not really a fair comparison because unlike every other example thus far, this one is entirely pre-rendered. I considered leaving it off this list due to that fact, but it's Final Fantasy VII. Someone in the comments is going to get mad at me if I don't include it. The odd overhead angle makes this area feel precarious and unnerving. It almost looks like the elevator shaft is a flat track with the lift platform being tilted at an angle. The area here is really grimy and run down in a way we haven't seen yet, and the lighting is absolutely fantastic. Unfortunately, there's three things about this elevator that make it hard to give it a high rating. First, just like the elevator in Metal Gear, this one has a fade-out transition as it descends. That's a lot more forgivable here since everything is pre-rendered and it only happens once, but I'm still not a fan of it. Second is this massive neon tube caution sign at the bottom of the lift. Why is this here? This thing is wider than the elevator platform, and it's on the floor at the bottom of the shaft, so you'd have to look down over the edge to even see it. It's also glowing bright white, which clashes with the other lights in the area and throws off the abandoned maintenance tunnel vibe. My third problem with this elevator is the music that plays when you ride it. Just listen to this. What is this triumphant marching band music? It doesn't fit these visuals at all. This area has worse tonal whiplash than Deadly Premonition, and for that, I have to put it in D tier. Sticking with Final Fantasy, the next elevator I have is from FF13. This one is pretty basic in its design. The platform looks a lot lighter and less imposing than the other ones we've seen, but for being so stripped back, it is immaculately rendered with a ton of intricate detail. I particularly like this sci-fi control panel and the cables that snake across the platform. The lighting here is also just fantastic. I love the vibe this whole elevator shaft gives off, even if it's only here to mask a loading screen. I had a hard time deciding how to rank this one, but I ultimately couldn't justify giving it anything higher than a B tier. As much as I like the visuals, that's really the only thing this one has going for it. Now we're down to the final two, neither of which I was aware of until I saw them referenced in that previously mentioned Rock Paper Shotgun article. The first one of these is the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles arcade game. The sprite work on the elevator track here is really good. It's detailed and has a lot of color and depth to it. The elevator platform, on the other hand, is incredibly basic, just a gray steel slab with a mesh grate in the middle. There's also barely any color variance, and the shade of gray they went with makes the whole thing look like it's made out of plastic. The elevator ride itself is also nothing special, and it's over pretty quick. The one main thing of note is these cannonballs that you need to dodge. I know 80s arcade hardware was pretty limited, but I'm certain it was possible to do better than this. C tier. Now for the final Akira elevator I have today, Silent Bomber. This game actually has two Akira elevators in one area that you ride almost back to back. These lifts are identical to each other. They're both about the same size as the one in Metal Gear, but they are notably less detailed. The standout feature of these ones is that they act as an extension of the combat arena of whatever floor they stop on. That's pretty cool, and was probably not the easiest thing to pull off technically, especially at the time. Outside of that, these lifts are a bit basic and a little underwhelming, but not terrible by any means. High B tier. And that's it. That's all the Akira elevators in games that I'm personally aware of. I'm certain there are a lot more of these, so let me know of any that I missed down in the comments below. Hopefully I'll be able to gather enough examples to make a follow-up video at some point, because I am legitimately obsessed with this topic. There are also some games where I remember there being an Akira elevator, but I wasn't able to find it for this video. Specifically Control, and at least one of the Metroid Prime games. I haven't played any of those since I started taking notes on Akira elevators though, so it's possible I'm misremembering. Also, I swear I played a 2D pixel art game at some point that featured a massive Akira elevator with a big observation room-like cab on it. No idea what game that was. If anyone knows, please leave a comment telling me. Alright, I think that's it. Big thanks to the people who support me through YouTube memberships, and subscribe if you want to catch any follow-up videos I make to this one. I'll see you guys later.